The bronze of 10,000 shields catches the midday sun, casting a blinding glare across the dust of the Scamander plain. Between two silent armies, a single space of scorched earth remains empty, waiting for the blood of two men to claim it. Menelaus, the king of Sparta, stands like a pillar of weathered stone, his knuckles white around the grip of his spear. Opposite him, Paris, the prince of Troy, the thief of hearts, adjusts his leopard skin cloak with trembling fingers, his eyes darting across the horizon. The air is thick with the scent of roasted lamb and the metallic tang of impending slaughter. The question hangs in the shimmering heat. Will a decade of war end with one clean stroke of iron, or will the pride of a coward drag a civilization into the dirt? 9 years had bled into the soil of Troy before this moment of desperate sanity arrived. The Achaeans were weary, their ships were rotting on the shore, their hearts heavy with the memory of wives and sons left behind in the mist of Greece. The Greeks dreamed of hearths they hadn't seen in a decade, while the Trojans were no less broken, huddled behind high walls, watching their fields burn and their youth wither in the shadow of the Scaean gates. A stalemate of bone and bronze had defined their lives, a slow grinding of two great powers that refused to break. The gods watched from Olympus, bored by the repetitive carnage, waiting for a spark to ignite the final tragedy. Then came the challenge, not from the kings, but from the man whose lust had ignited the fire. Paris, glittering in his finery, had stepped forth to boast, only to recoil like a man who had stepped upon a viper when he saw the red-haired Menelaus lunging from his chariot. The plan was a masterstroke of common sense, a rare visitor to the fields of war. Hector, the true heart of Troy, had silenced the grumbling of the ranks with a proposal that tasted of justice. He looked upon the weary faces of his kinsmen and saw that they could endure no more of this slow rot. Let the armies stand back, let the thousands who had no stake in a stolen queen find rest. Two men would fight, the husband who was wronged and the prince who had taken. The winner would take the gold, the treasures, and the woman. The loser would find his end, and the war would vanish like smoke in the morning wind. It was a tidy resolution, a way to fold the map of conflict and go home. But in the tents of the high kings, there was a silent friction. Agamemnon hungered for more than a wife's return. He craved the soot of a burning Troy and the submission of her people. Priam, aged and wise, looked at his son and saw only the ghost of a funeral pyre, sensing that the gods were far from finished with his bloodline. The preparation was a ritual of heavy silence. Menelaus stripped to his tunics, his scars telling the story of a lifetime spent in the service of the spear. He prayed not for glory, but for vengeance. He took up his heavy shield, a wall of bull's hide and bronze, and felt the familiar weight of his ashwood spear. Menelaus tightened the bronze greaves on his thick calves, the metal scarred and dented from 100 previous battles. In the Trojan camp, Paris was adorned rather than armed. His armor was too bright, his movements too fluid, lacking the grim geometry of a killer. He looked less like a warrior and more like a prize waiting to be claimed by the earth. Hector leaned close to his brother, his voice a low growl that carried the weight of a city's survival. "This is not a dance in the halls of a king, brother. If you fall, do not expect the earth to catch you gently." Paris looked at the high walls, seeing the white robes of Helen among the elders, and took up a bow, the weapon of a man who fears the reach of a sword. The threshold was crossed when the two sides withdrew, carving a circle of fate. The wind died down, as if the world itself were holding its breath for the judgment of the iron. Menelaus stepped into the ring, his boots crunching on the dry earth, a predator finally finding the path to its prey. Paris followed, his eyes darting to the Greek lines, then to the Trojan walls, looking for an exit that did not exist. The pact had been sworn in the blood of lambs. The gods had been called as witnesses. There was no turning back. Menelaus strikes first, his spear a streak of grey light through the dust. He does not aim for the heart, he aims for the soul of the man who shamed him. Paris, driven by a sudden, frantic survival instinct, crouches behind his shield. The bronze tip of the spear bites deep into the center of the prince's buckler, the force of the blow shivering up Paris's arm and bucking his knees. Menelaus is a storm of iron. He does not wait. He draws his silver-studded sword. The blade sings as it clears the scabbard. He brings it down with the fury of a decade's resentment, a heavy hacking blow meant to split the Trojan prince from crown to navel. The sword connects with Paris's helmet, a sound like a hammer hitting an anvil echoing across the plain. But the steel of the Achaean king shatters against the divine-wrought bronze of the prince's gear. The blade flies into a dozen glittering shards, leaving Menelaus with nothing but a hilt and a heart full of rage. "Zeus," he bellows at the uncaring sky. "You are the most cruel of the gods. I had him in my grip." Menelaus throws the broken hilt into the dust and lunges forward with his bare hands. He does not need a blade to finish this. He seizes Paris by the horsehair crest of his helmet, twisting the bronze with a strength born of pure hatred, and begins to drag him toward the Greek lines. The struggle is no longer a duel, it is a brutal execution. Paris is face down in the dirt, the embroidered strap of his helmet tightening around his throat, choking the breath from his lungs. His fingers claw at the earth, seeking a grip, a weapon, a miracle, but find only the cold sand of the plain. Menelaus hauls him like a carcass, his muscles bulging, the veins in his neck like corded rope. The Greek soldiers begin to cheer, a low rumble that grows into a roar. They can see the end of their long exile. They can see the ships being pushed back into the water and the peace that follows the storm. But as the strap bites deeper, threatening to end the life of the shepherd prince, the air around Paris begins to shimmer with an eerie, golden light. The revelation is not one of strength, but of the terrifying whim of the divine. Menelaus feels the weight in his hand suddenly vanish. The helmet strap, which should have held firm, snaps as if cut by an invisible knife. He is left holding a hollow shell of bronze and horsehair while Paris is gone. A thick, unnatural mist, smelling of mountain flowers and ancient desire, swirls where the prince had been struggling. In that heavy moment of silence, Menelaus realizes he is not fighting a man, but a puppet of the gods. The duel was never about honor or the laws of men. It was a theater for the immortals, and the ending had been scripted long before the first spear was thrown. The immediate conflict ends in a hollow silence. Aphrodite, the goddess who had promised Paris his prize, had snatched him from the jaws of death, whisking him away to the safety of his perfumed bedchamber. Menelaus stands alone in the center of the ring, a king robbed of his kill, his hands empty and shaking. He prowls the circle like a lion whose prey has turned to smoke, stabbing his spear into the empty air, demanding the body of his vanished enemy. The Trojans look at one another in shame. The Greeks look on in mounting fury. The truce, so carefully constructed, begins to fray at the edges before the ink on the oaths is even dry. In the aftermath, the plain of Troy feels colder, despite the sun. The armies do not move. There is a heavy, suffocating confusion. The Trojans would have given Paris up in a heartbeat. They loathed him as much as the Greeks did, for his beauty was a curse. Inside the city, behind bolted doors, Helen stands over the man who was almost her liberation. She looks at Paris, not with love, but with a searing contempt. He is alive, but he is diminished, a hero who survived because a goddess found his cowardice charming. She is dragged back into his embrace not by choice, but by the same divine hand that saved him. She is the prize that no one won, the queen of a city that is now certain to burn. The cost of this failed solution is written in the sudden, sharp movement of a bow in the Trojan ranks. A single arrow, prompted by a goddess's whisper, streaks through the air to strike Menelaus, breaking the sacred truce. The wound is shallow, but the breach is total. The blood that spills from the king's side is the final payment for the hope of peace. The exhaustion of the soldiers turns into a dark, nihilistic rage as they realize the end is far away. They had been promised a way out, and it had been snatched away by the cowardice of a prince and the meddling of the sky. This duel becomes the moment where peace was possible and deliberately rejected, sealing Troy's fate. Menelaus learns that in a world ruled by the whims of the gods, merit is a coin that often buys nothing. History remembers Menelaus as the jilted king who started 1,000 ships. But in the trial of the duel, he learned that honor is a fragile shield. The war has moved beyond the grievances of two men. Now it belongs to the monsters and the fire. Next, we witness the rise of Diomedes, a mortal who dares to do what Menelaus could not, draw the blood of the gods themselves. Walk with us through the old stories. Subscribe to Saga Weaver, where ancient warriors face impossible choices and the gods play for keeps.